Okay.
All right, I'll call to order this meeting of the Sturgis City Council tonight, September 29th, 2025. This is a special council meeting that we set to cover some budget items and we agenda items to go along with it. Please stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight we have Brian Ross that's going to offer us a prayer.
Okay, let's pray. Father, I thank you for our time together tonight, Lord. Thank you for the beautiful rain that you gave in the sky afterwards. And Lord, you said if we lack wisdom, that we should ask, and you are wanting and willing to give us wisdom. And so I pray for wisdom for this council as they're considering the things that are before them. And Lord, your word also says that wisdom is first pure and then peaceable. And so I pray, Lord, that there would be peace in our time tonight, Lord. And we just thank you for the light that Sturgis is putting forth of how a good council works together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Item 3 is approval of the agenda. Someone willing to motion the agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
First by Alex, second by Terry to approve the agenda. Those in favor indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
That has carried unanimously. Item 4 is announcements and praise. Does anyone from council have announcements? Jim, you have our city list, if you will, for the night.
I'll pass that on. Coming up this Thursday, October 2nd, the Sturgis Area Chamber of Commerce annual Ag Appreciation Banquet will be held at 5 o'clock, and that'll be at the Armory. And that's 5 o'clock Thursday. Also on Thursday, the Armchair Travelers Book Club will meet at noon in the Lushbau Room at the Sturgis Public Library right here in this building. Also on Thursday, August 2nd, or October 2nd, the Sturgis Ambulance Blood Drive will run from 10:30 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon at the Sturgis Fire Hall on Ballpark Road. This weekend, Friday and Saturday, the 3rd and 4th, twilight tours at the Old Fort Meade Museum from 6 until 8 p.m. That's on Friday and Saturday at Fort Meade. This coming Saturday is the Sturgis Fall Community Yard Sale held throughout Sturgis. Next week, Monday, October 6th through Friday, October 10th, is the Sturgis Fall Citywide Cleanup. Thanks, Rick, and your crew for putting that back on the calendar this year. That's Monday through Friday next week, a week from today, October 6th through October 10th. And those are the things ready for tonight.
Great, thank you, Jim. Does anyone else have announcements or praise? How about someone from the audience? Any announcements or praise? Okay, continuing on. Item 5 is non-agenda matters that may come before council. This is the time for anything that's not on the agenda. If you would like to address the council on it, please do so now. You can approach the dais, state your name if you will, please.
Can you hear me?
My
name is Kelly McCullum, and this is my wife, Paula. Property on 1324 Spruce Street here in Sturgis, and we have some drainage concerns on our property.
1324 Spruce. Can you describe what you've got?
We are in a floodplain. Our property is on floodplain. Our neighbors beside us have filled in the natural drainage, causing water to back up onto our property. And according to your ordinance 150702, no property owner is allowed to impede a natural floodplain. And this has been done. I've addressed it to some people, and I just wonder if there's something we can do about it.
Have you had conversation with our public works team?
Yes.
Eric, is this something that we need to continue, or can you provide recommendation for these people?
Yeah, I mean, FEMA issues or city ordinance violations would first be addressed by staff, and I guess my suggestion would be that go through the staff process and deal with it administratively that way, and then bring it to the council if it needs further action, but it would be a code enforcement, ordinance enforcement issue.
Okay.
I have visited with Jason from Bros Engineers as well, contacted FEMA, and they directed me to the state NFIP director, and he is passing it on to the Denver FEMA of violation of ordinances, and they're going to be contacting me tomorrow on that too, so.
Okay. Can you circle back then with our Public Works Director or actually, you said code violation, did you not, Eric?
Well, just, I don't know anything about this, so staff would need to go through it, gather some facts, find the relevant issues, do an investigation. It'd be an administrative process.
Yeah, we visited with, we had. Yeah, I believe Mr. Bush has been there, seen that.
The last week, we asked you to get some engineering done.
Yeah.
I haven't seen
Yeah,
anything.
that's when Jason would come on. Jason came back out there again a couple weeks ago along with Donovan and Dennis. Were all down there and noted the water that was backed up on our property.
So the building inspector and the code enforcer were on site with you?
Yes,
Okay.
as well as Jason from Bros Engineering.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing it forward to the council. I mean, we have a team that can work with you on it. Hopefully, we can find resolution for you.
Yep, and we have more issues, but that's in the next agenda item, so we'll be done for now.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Anyone else have a non-agenda item?
Hi there, Christina Bean, 1316 Spruce. We are the neighbors that Kelly and Paula just complained about. The code enforcement officer has been to our home. They documented everything, said that we needed to get them changed. The work that was done was approved through an engineer. It's all stamped, done, closed in a file, because we also watched the water level, and it would go down unless it rained. I personally watched it every single day, and it is impossible for Kelly to watch it, given the fact that he is the one landlord that has complained and doesn't even live in the city of Sturgis. One landlord that has complained about temporary residential camping.
Okay, well, we've got administrative work to do on this to see how this lands, so,
I just wanted it on record that we've already addressed the issue and it had been closed case because we did what we were supposed to do.
okay, thank you for your statement. Anyone else? Any member of council have something non-agenda that they'd like to bring up tonight before we move on?
I thought we had a great weekend with the soccer tournament in town, and the town was buzzing.
Yeah,
It looked good to see the town full.
it certainly was, but where were you at during announcements and praise?
He's just lightening the mood.
I forgot.
It's good to see the town busy like that. Thank you, Counselor. Continuing on, department updates. Right now, item 6.1 is the only item on the department updates. Aaron, do you have a piece of this that you want to start off with, or do you want Eric to step right in?
Me, you said? Good evening, Mayor, Council, Eric Davis, City Attorney. In response to requests from the council, I've had the opportunity to delve into Chapter 1108 of our code that deals with temporary residential camping at residences in Sturgis. Reviewed that provision of the code, went back and looked at the legislative history, wrote you up a brief 2-page report in your staff report. Also familiarized or refamiliarized myself with the state statutes concerning campgrounds and what Department of Health, the South Dakota Department of Health's jurisdiction is over that, what the statutory definition of a campground is. Had a good conversation with an employee of the health department about this issue. You know, I don't have much to add that's not particularly in my report. We were going through, you know, in response to a specific request, but looking at the ordinance more holistically, what it is, and just as a summary, the council updated this ordinance back in 2021 to make some updates to a 2012 ordinance that just addressed regulated camping in the city of Sturgis. And where we are today, at least on my read of this current ordinance, is that the council elected to allow property owners to have one public camping site during the rally and otherwise to limit residential camping to non-public camping. There is state law, state regulations that go into effect when a person is holding out more than one campsite as available to the public, as in like commercial camping, that would trigger the state application and permitting process. My understanding from talking to Department of Health is that they are not particularly interested in regulating these small temporary 1 or 2 unit campgrounds, and their understanding, the city worked with them back in 2021 in coordination with them and passing this ordinance, and they were happy with Sturgis's regulation of this. So the bottom line is, you know, we talked a little bit about the permit scheme that is established by Chapter 110821. That permit is about granting relief from some of the restrictions that would kick in when you have more than one camping unit on a property. It would essentially be a variance. It isn't the kind of permit that under our current ordinance would allow for the kind of commercial, open, public camping that we're kind of seeing in Sturgis. So that would be the policy consideration for the council as we move forward. I think my questions would be, does the council want to leave the existing ordinance as it is now, which severely limits residential camping that would have the effect of pushing most residential campers out to established campgrounds, and we would enforce that ordinance. If the council would like to change the ordinance, then we would just need some direction on to what extent we want to do that. My suggestion would be just come up with some reasonable health, safety, welfare limits, restrictions, a permitting process. We would probably work that through staff, through Aaron, through Rick, Jody, me, come up with a draft talking sheet, term sheet, draft ordinance for you to review, go through that process with first reading, second reading. But the status quo as it exists today is residential camping is severely limited, and I think the mayor, the city administrator are intending to enforce the ordinance as it is written unless the council wants to change it. So that's the kind of direction I'm seeking, and happy to answer your questions about anything in the report or otherwise.
Thank you, Eric. Any counselors have comments on that? This certainly is an item that has differing views through differing members of the community.
May I ask a question? Eric, it looks like the present ordinance says that you can have 19 people as opposed to 19 tents. So is it limited by the people or by the space available for rent?
Well, both. I'll have to find the section. Jim, where are you seeing the 19?
I read it on, I didn't have,
Yeah.
I didn't make a copy of it, but I read it.
Summary of current ordinance.
Yeah, so it's in my report. I'm looking at the ordinance here.
It's under the current regulations.
Page 3 of 3.
Yeah. I don't want it in my report. I'm looking in the ordinance. I'll find it.
It's in the density limitations, 1186.
That's not what I'm looking at. 11.8. I'm sorry, Bonnie. Thank you. Thank you. So the density limitation in the ordinance, it's 110806. No temporary non-public camping activities permitted by this ordinance shall authorize more than 19 campers to stay on any residential parcel. I am interpreting that as 19 individuals, since camping unit is defined under the ordinance. So it does regulate a density limitation. It also regulates the number of campsites and indicates that only one campsite is allowed. So it would be one designated campsite with up to 19 individuals is how I am interpreting the current ordinance. And that would be non-public camping.
Okay, thank you.
What is, can you define that? Non-public camping is versus public camping. What is the?
We would probably go to the statutory definition. So what the Department of Health uses is the definition that is set forth in South Dakota codified law talks about holding out sites to the public. And so when the Department of Health is talking about public camping, that's the distinction that they're making. And so I would probably illustrate it to you this way. You know, if I was to put my property, I have an sites that are built in, 2 driveways at my house that can accommodate an RV. I'll put it on Airbnb, I'll set a rate, put it out and rent it to people. That would be public commercial camping. I'm holding out these sites as available for the public to come in and rent. Versus if I have 2 buddies from law school that call me and say, oh, you live in Sturgis, we want to come out, can we come stay with you and park at your place? That would be non-public camping. So there's a commercial element, an advertising element versus just friends, family, allowing your own connections to take advantage there.
So that makes it a relationship issue. If I were going to charge those law school buddies, does that make it public?
You know, this is where we start getting into kind of the gray area. I mean, if one of, I guess this is my example, so I'll keep going with it. If they say, we'd like to buy you a bottle of scotch and thank you, like, I don't think that's holding out sites to the public. The question goes to my intent, how I'm advertising this. Am I operating a business or am I just accommodating people? If there was, hey, we want to slip you $100, I don't think the city gets into regulating that. I don't think the state gets into regulating that. That's a private relationship with people. It's the holding out of these sites to the public is what triggers the regulation in state law. So I think what we're looking at, there's a couple different competing public policy arguments. I certainly have no opinions of my own on those, but it appears when I'm reading the current ordinance, it is to limit the amount of camping that's done in town and to kick those private campgrounds up to state regulation. There's certainly a valid public policy argument to be made in support of that, of getting people not camping in town and out camping in established campgrounds. That may be what was in the council's mind when they passed this ordinance. That's what would make sense to me in reading the ordinance. I think there's also certainly a very valid public policy argument to be made for allowing property owners to use their property to generate money from the rally, subject to some reasonable health, safety, welfare restrictions and probably a permitting process. But if the council does want to change this ordinance, we would probably do that in conjunction, not just with our staff, but with the Department of Health, because they are relying on us to regulate and manage these local issues. And if we were to stop, for example, and say, well, let's just make it a free-for-all, the state is probably going to come in and want to have some conversations with us about that. So if the council wants to go in the direction of allowing some sort of limited commercial camping with a permitting process, we would clear that with the state first before we brought you any kind of draft of a first reading of an ordinance to change this regulation.
May I ask, are there other cities, do we know of other cities that have similar issues? Custer, for example, with the Buffalo Roundup, do they have campgrounds in people's homes?
I'm not entirely sure. I know Deb was doing a little looking. There was an indication that maybe Huron did. I'm sure there are other communities. This is a core municipal function talking about specific local health, safety, welfare issues. So the council definitely has the authority to regulate this. And if it is the council's desire to at least explore the possibility of opening up residential camping beyond what is allowed by our current ordinance, we would look at what other communities are doing. It doesn't make any sense to reinvent the wheel, but we would ultimately choose, the council would obviously choose what was right for Sturgis. We are always our own animal, but of course there may be similarities with State Fair or Buffalo Roundup or the like.
I guess personally, I'd like to at least explore it. You know, I don't want to open the floodgates to camping anywhere all year, but if we could somehow limit it to the rally time period, or maybe it's something similar to what it is now, 21 days within a period or whatever, but with some regulations so that there was some control. I mean, I don't want to open the floodgates per se, but I would like to see people be able to take advantage of the rally and make a little money if they can.
I would also be in support of the same thing, because I would love to see people be able to capitalize on this event that comes to our town every single year for 85 years now, but within reason. And I would expect that we would rely on staff to help provide guidelines and support of, as far as when it comes to public health and safety, of what those guidelines should be. But I would 100% support exploring that and opening that up so people can use the property to capitalize on revenue during the rally.
And I would like, you know, if it's possible, that is part of the, you know, wherever we land with this as part of the regulations. I mean, neighbors should have some input on this, right? I mean, we shouldn't be, just because neighbor A wants to make some money, neighbor B shouldn't be inconvenienced. I mean, similar to our current variance process.
Yep, and that's how I would imagine that this would go if, and you know, we're still kind of in the early stages, but it would be a permitting process very similar to, I think, building permits, where the council would establish the health, safety, welfare criteria and probably kick that over to a staff approval level to go through with an application and say, you know, the proposed use will not create any unreasonable you know, the proposed use will have a reasonable sanitation plan, has a reasonable parking plan that will not result in an unusual amount of traffic or parking in the neighborhood. Noise ordinances will be followed, extra trash pickup, things like that. Staff would probably review that, and then any denials or appeals of that would go to the Board of Adjustment. Again, when we're talking about things like permits with specific criteria, that would go to the Board of Adjustment, where neighbor concerns would be more related to the general criteria of making sure that health, safety, sanitation, traffic, parking are addressed and dealt with. Neighbors wouldn't get a veto over that under that kind of permitting scheme, for the same reason that neighbors wouldn't get a veto over a building permit or painting my house color, for example. So yes, those would probably go to the Board of Adjustment. But I'm happy to answer any more questions. I guess just for action purposes, I think what my takeaway will be, and if the council wants to take action on this, if you want to just by consensus have some direction for future reporting, that's fine. We would have to go through the entire ordinance updating process, first reading, second reading, referendum period, and then approval after 20 days. So we would be very much in the beginning stages of this. I would probably hold off on putting together a draft ordinance for now and just come up working with, and it probably won't be me, it'll probably be Aaron, but me, Aaron, Rick, Jody, relevant staff members get together, come up with the criteria, sketch out an idea for, visit with the state. Again, you were talking about free-for-alls. Again, the state's not going to let us do that. They're going to come in and say, well, then we're going to regulate it. communicate with the State Department of Health, see what they're good with, and then just bring you back some talking points, and we can talk about number of camping sites, number of camping units, the kinds of criteria, the permitting process, procedural process, things like that, and then maybe we can see if we are in a place where we can move forward with a draft that would go to first reading.
Well, the ordinance committee meets on October 8th. What's possible by then? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
that's okay. I think I'm going to move into my office on Wednesday, and we have a response due to American Legal on October 6th. I don't know if we're going to make that deadline or not. So there's a lot of other priorities right now. I think we could definitely be ready to have a conversation with the ordinance committee. We wouldn't be ready for them to review like a first reading or anything yet, but I think it would be good to refer it to them. And that would be a question for the council. You know, the council has established this ordinance committee, and there may be some timing considerations that are important here that we want to get done. Taking it over to the ordinance committee, who only meets once a month, might delay the process. Not to suggest that their input wouldn't be valuable, but that would always be the council's discretion to say, let's keep this with the council right now, or do we want to kick this over to the ordinance committee, or maybe not kick it over to them until there's a first reading. I think it could be however the council wants to do it.
Well, since we do have an ordinance committee, it would seem, and we're actively doing that, it would seem wise to keep everything within the confines of an ordinance committee as opposed to starting here, changing something today.
I guess I'd like to have a little more discussion on it with everybody's input before it landed at ordinance committee. I mean, certainly they're going to have input too, but I don't know that we're...
May I ask, is the ordinance committee open to the public?
We haven't, I guess we've only had the one meeting that nothing happened. It was just
in
a
general, would a committee meeting be open to the public?
In general, unless there's a quorum and it's posted as a public notice, the council they don't exercise any sovereign authority, so they are not a commission or anything like that. Their meetings are not now open to the public. Of course, if we go through a proposed revision to this ordinance, there would be a public hearing at second reading,
Sure.
and as many public hearings as the council would want to have.
Bonnie has a question.
Bonnie, you've got a...
Bonnie Alberts. When I read this, there are a number of things in it that I don't understand. There are terms that I don't know what they mean in this context. So I would hope for opportunities for a lot more explanation. But my first thought was, we're already embarking on redoing the ordinances. So where does this fit into that process? And I look at things in here because I do have rally campers, and I have always thought, without actually looking it up, I've always thought it was a 19 head count, and that's what I have stuck to very carefully. And then we had the conversation at one of the meetings, and it sounded like 19 tents, and I thought, okay, well, I'm sticking with 19 heads because that's more than enough for my facility. But then as I'm looking at this, and I appreciate what you did here, Eric, because I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that this ordinance came forth in 2021, and I thought, how come I didn't see this go through? Because, you know, I was practicing recreational responsible citizenship in 21, but I was down with COVID for several months in 21, so I imagine it flowed through when I was not paying attention. But as we talk about the ordinance committee, I'm not understanding quite how that process is going to work and how the people assigned to that committee are going to be 360-degree knowledgeable enough for all the issues they're going to address, and I don't see any access to that for the public, and that concerns me as we work through this process. I mean, this is a big project. But I look at what I can see here, and I did not have time to look up any of this on my own and read the whole thing. I probably wouldn't understand it anyway. But this ordinance seems to have been written by people who were against backyard campers during rally. And I think that there needs to be some good balance of perspective on that. And it flies in the face of things that are actually happening in town. And I think I left one of my papers in the car, but one of them is non-resident rally properties. I have one across the street from me. I'm a good neighbor to them. They're a good neighbor to me. They live in Florida. They're only here for a week or two during the rally, and their friends from all over the country come and stay with them there in the yard. Is parking a little bit of a problem? A little bit, but they're very considerate about it. But where I live, parking is a problem whether you have anybody camping in the neighborhood or not. You know, I'm just a couple blocks off Main Street, so parking is a problem during the rally. Am I going to get upset about it as a problem? No, it's the rally. It's been like that since I bought the house in '73. That's 50 years, you know, so you take those things in stride. But where does this address? It talks about the residency factor. Where does that address people who don't live in that house? That house sits empty all year long, and have camping friends come. Well, how does this address rentals? In my house, I get the question, do I have to move out during the rally? So that's clearly a practice going on in this town somewhere, because everybody who's renting a house is worried about it anyway when they ask about renting my house. So I just think that there are a lot of facets that aren't reflected here at all. Am I for keeping an eye on things? Yes. Am I for guaranteeing sanitation? I put in, depending on how many people I expect to have, I put in a porta potty when I need it. Sometimes I put in 2, sometimes I put in none, if it's going to be a lean year. So I'm for all of those things being done right and for being in step with the Department of Health. But I really think that there are some missing perspectives in what we see here. And somehow, as we address this, to wait for public input until we're at second reading or even at first reading, my experience with those actions from the council is at that point, we don't want to have to rewrite anything. We don't want to have to go through another 2 weeks before we can look at this again. It is not welcome at that point. The input needs to come way before we get to readings. So I ask for that as we do this, I think we need some input from people who have campers, people who don't want campers, people who don't live here and have campers. I think there needs to be way more perspective than went into this in 21. And, you know, in 21, it's like Mark Carstenson's good buddies with the people across the street from me who come from Florida. And I'm sure that this never hit his head that they might be in violation in any way. I just think we need more perspective. And I would ask for that as we move forward on that. And I'd like to have some input before we get down to nitty-picky first and second readings.
Thank you, Bonnie. You know, I think a couple of points are that part of the ordinance that was amended was to try and deal with vacant lots that were being used for camping purposes. And I think the key in the ordinance, I think Eric did a fine job of outlining that, you know, offering it to the public. So that could be a gray area. I mean, it sounds like Eric would be happy for for Scotch, maybe somebody else would go a different route, and maybe the people across the street that you're referencing, I mean, they're not offering those to the public. Maybe it's their friends and family. I mean, that gets to be a difficult piece to regulate.
But what happens when I have campers who are people I know, but they bring friends with them who are not people I know, but we're inclusive, we take them in, we're okay with that. Does that make it public because I didn't know them before they got there? They're friends of friends? I just think we didn't, I think we're trying to solve one problem and created some others and didn't think about it full circle before that ordinance went through. And so I just strongly want to recommend that those of us who are involved in this have some income, those of us who are opposed to it have some input. I don't have any problem with my folks across the street. I look out for their house all year long when they're gone. And so we just need to think about everybody who's affected by it.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. You know, right now we're just kind of brainstorming, you know, what the approach would be. You know, I kind of lean towards having our ordinance committee involved, but I also see this as an opportunity for a subcommittee to be able to kind of work with this also. However, before we do anything with the ordinance committee, and kind of piggyback on what Eric said, is that we got some work to do and develop some criteria, but that criteria has to be informed, you know, by South Dakota Department of Health, potentially even the South Dakota Department of Revenue, and potentially even FEMA, if we're talking about places where there are you're within a 100-year floodplain. So I think we need to get that type of understanding so we kind of understand what's feasible, what we can do, what we can't do. And then based on that, then we can start looking at different options. And I think that's when we bring in either the ordinance committee or a subcommittee, because we got multiple things that we're trying to do when it comes down to recodification. The last report that we got from Eric is that we have 3 phases. You know, the first phase is basically kind of correct some of the spelling errors and some of those type of things and change it from the format that we've been used to for the last couple of decades into the American legal format that's more searchable, a lot more efficient. So that was phase 1. Phase 2 was to review our ordinances to make sure those things that are currently unlawful, that we change those things. And then phase 3 was everything else that we wanted to do. You know, we're talking about what we call Title VII in terms of our governments. We've talked about, you know, what's the one that you and I have been working with, Ruth, talking about
Talking about short-term rentals?
Yeah, short-term rentals. Now we have the residential camping, and it's not just residential camping. We also have some issues when it comes down to commercial camping down within the tax district area downtown. So we probably could take a holistic approach and take a look at this. But since we have so many things that we're trying to do, I think that's where that subcommittees kind of come into play. Those subcommittees will have representation maybe from the actual committee right now. It would have some staff representation. It also have representation from the public for people that are involved in this that can help us have a better understanding of evaluating those different criteria and looking at those different options. So again, I do think we need to engage with the public and figure out what the right, you know, recommendation is. But again, before we get too far down the line, we do definitely get our ducks in a row in terms of understanding what is feasible, what can we do. You know, and maybe there may be some areas in the gray area that gives us some options or gives you some options, but we need to understand that piece of it. Now, a lot of this is done by your planning and permitting section. Right now, that's Rick. Rick is also wearing another hat as the Public Works Director. You know, we did have that position opened. We had one application, was not qualified. It's been open for a long time. Working with our new HR director to repost that one, and we may need to sweeten the deal a little bit to be able to to get somebody that's qualified in that position. But, you know, right now from a bandwidth perspective, you know, I can speak for Rick, and, you know, and you guys know Rick, I don't have to speak for him. He will speak absolutely for himself. But just from the city administrative perspective, I mean, there's a lot on there. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't prioritize the camping piece of it, because it does have an impact. We're getting ready for the 86th rally. It's only 11 months away. I know it seems like a long time, but it will go pretty quick. And this does have some implications on people that have camping in their yards. Where the camping, the 19 comes into play, and when you have 19 camping unit, that's if you're on the non-conforming. That's where you've been grandfathered in from August 1st of 2012. You've owned that property. You've owned that property continuously. You've operated it continuously as a campground since 2012. That's where the 19 camping units comes in to play. If you're talking about non-public, outside of non-conforming, that's where the 19 campers comes into play, piece of it. So I agree. I think this is something that needs to be a priority for us, but it's one of many priorities. I think we can chew gum and walk at the same time, so that's where I think that subcommittee can come into play, and that we can have multiple types of people moving the football forward on all three phases of recodification.
Bonnie, I would say, as a member of that committee, I believe it should be open to the public from the very beginning. And it depends then on the chair. And in this case, Bob Havela has been selected as the chair. And he needs to be able to control the time and the flow through it so that otherwise we're talking about a long process. And yet, considering their ordinances that people have to obey, we need to take that time, and we need to hear all that we can so we know as we're making those changes. I think we probably have seen some conflicts, some rules that do conflict with one another of the same issues. And if that's the case, we need to find those quickly and then find out which ones are what is the best part of that. I don't know if we're going to look at something like the 2012, anything that was done then is fine, or if it's just going to throw that out and start over. But we need to have the public at least know what we're thinking. I agree with that. It shouldn't we don't have a newspaper to print it the next day. We do have, I don't see Brandon here tonight, but we do have people online that are doing some of those things. But at least from my perspective, I think the public should have a part in it from the very beginning. And again, I'm not the chair.
So in the past, we actually had a discussion in council that led into a first reading. I think some pieces of that, at least organizing some of the staff thoughts and whatnot, could work through the ordinance committee, but especially for some of our more contentious ordinance updates, it does seem like some level of public discussion would save us some backlog on time. Although the first reading is truly the place to have the discussion, and I don't think it should ever be construed as a spot that we've already made a decision and you can't make any changes. So there's two schools of thought there for sure. Would the council be looking at, I mean, I haven't heard from anything from this side of the team here, but there's certainly been a few things said about looking at an ordinance that maybe can fit between some of the community's desires and some of the problems that happen. I think I agree with what Aaron and Eric have said as far as, I mean, there's pieces of this that maybe need to be set. Just 1 second, please. We got two people that want to speak. So we don't have anything to consider except a direction for how we wish to provide Eric and Aaron to move forward on this. We can certainly set the parameters on how we want to have it. In the past, sometimes we had work sessions in council meetings. I personally don't like work sessions because those limit public comment. So if we're going to actually have a full discussion, we need to have a full discussion. There was a couple people that wanted to make comments. Kelly? Will you state your name again, just for...
Kelly McCollum, thank you for letting me come back up here. In response to my drainage concern from my neighbors, according to ordinance 150702, I'll just read you the first two lines.
Kelly, can we stay on, we're talking about an agenda item on camping.
Okay.
We'll certainly look into and be able to circle back, but we're not gonna,
It's not a closed case. It's, yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Appreciate. Do you have a comment on camping?
Yes, so I guess before the rally, a few days before the rally, there was a camper parked in the front of our neighbor's yard. There were several campsites being put up in our backyard. I contacted Councilman Thompson, picked him up in the morning, didn't tell him what was going on. I drove him over there, told him this is my property, and showed him the camper sitting in the front and asked him, is that something he would want by his place? His comment was no. I drove to the backyard in the alley, showed him everything that was going on and being done back there. I asked him the same question, if that's something he would want next to his house, and his answer was no. So I guess my question is, why do we have to, if you consider something like this, why do we have to allow that next to our property? Your comments were, you know, would you want that next to your property? And you don't have to answer, but that's my comment. And if it was, and we did experience there was a public campground there this year. It was full of tents, full of whatever. And according to your ordinances, you know, a public campsite has to follow the South Dakota Department of Health. State, you know, sales tax revenues. It also has to follow the use of review permit because it is a residential property being used as a business, because it is a business. There is a website you can get on and look up Buddy's Campground. They charge even for a towel. So it is a deal. So that was all that done this year, where it's already been done once? Was all of those requirements already met on the campground this year?
Kelly, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think our code enforcement pulled those pieces together as part of this package of information.
Yeah.
I think it happened, I don't recall the timing expressly, but we had several kind of similar issues that we discovered during the rally where maybe we weren't landing where we needed to on this, and we made notice for those, but we didn't kick somebody out of a property, or we didn't make somebody move a vendor tent or some of those pieces this year, but we expect to be in line with our ordinances. I mean, for me, that's important. Our ordinances are what's governs our city, but we need to make sure that our ordinances protect but don't overburden our residents, and I think that's the actual topic that we're on tonight, not the specific item. I think you'll have a chance to express your concerns on this, but
Yeah, I was on the city council for 12 years, and I was the mayor for 6 years in Winter, South Dakota, so I'm very aware of what you guys are going through, and I appreciate the time and effort you guys put into it. It's not a fun situation at times. But also, if there is allowed to be a public campground there, as in your ordinances, the parking has to be on the parcel, not on the public street, not filling the alleyway up with trailers and whatnot. Your parking has to be within the parcel. So that was an issue this year. Noise, we had a lot of noise. There was karaoke being done at. We are landlords, as she stated, but we're protecting our tenants as well. They had to turn their air conditioners up on high all night so that they could not hear the noise and be able to sleep. They weren't allowed to park in front of their vehicles or in front of their houses. Yes, we don't have off-street parking. It's public parking there, but they weren't allowed to park there. Just issues that I guess we had this year, and that you would consider the public, and I would think the neighbors you should have input if somebody wants to do that. I mean, I don't know, if neighbor A wants to have a campground, neighbor B should have somewhat of an input as to what is going to happen there.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yep, thank
I
you.
think those points are part of the administrative review process to at least get us started on this.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Kelly, look, if I might, you did show me the property, and
Yep.
I would come back again to what Bonnie said. We are a rally town, and so understanding that there's going to be 3 weeks of inconvenience as a result of that, a strong proponent of personal property rights or property rights. If you own a property, you have the right to do that within the confines of the ordinances and the law. So if you bought the property knowing that you were going to rent it, that shouldn't surprise anyone in Sturgis. So
No, but your comment, your answer to my question was, no, you wouldn't want that there, so that's my point. You should have explained that to me, I guess, instead of saying, no, I wouldn't want that. That's
Well,
my point.
it wasn't quite
That
as
was my
simple.
point. Yeah,
It wasn't quite as simple as you said, but I understand. Yes, would I like that? We have in our area, we have someone that doesn't cut their grass, doesn't take care of the shrubbery. We don't like that.
So I guess the same question to you today, if would you want that next to your property? Would you?
I don't think that's a fair
Okay,
question for
okay,
tonight.
thank you.
Christina Bean. Maybe I'll get so used to this that my voice will stop shaking. But through all of this, I've written down a couple of notes and some clarifying things. Bonnie had mentioned, who is a resident and who isn't. And I did want to point out, because I did think that it needed some clarification, that in the purpose of 11.8, it actually reads, apparently I should have brought my iPad. Oh, thank you. It reads, I'm sorry, it's not.
I could read the purpose for 11.8.
I don't believe it was in the purpose. I do apologize. Let me just. There's a spot. Oh, it's in the definitions, and it says under temporary residential camping, the use of private residential property by the property owner or by others with the property owner's permission. So to that, I ask, does that mean that people that are landlords can allow their tenants to have camping in their backyard? It is my understanding that it's just homeowners and resident homeowners. So what defines a resident? Because there's also people that own the homes within the city of Sturgis that are primary residents across the state. So what does make you a resident of Sturgis that allows for camping? May I steal this again?
And non-public camping.
Yes, sorry, non-public camping. And then the other thing that I wanted to clarify right now with the current ordinance is parking. In 11.8.9, it states the homeowner shall provide sufficient temporary parking for all those persons provided parking in non-public camping on the residential parcel. But is that something that is also given a relief with the permitting process along with everything else? Because it says that, you're exempt from this ordinance if you've done this since 2012, but if you haven't done this since 2012, you can apply for relief for non-public parking, which leads me to my next question. Is if we are not advertising and are not charging, but somebody wants to give us a bottle of scotch or give us $100 or whatever, are we then allowed to be deemed as non-public because our friends and family are staying there? Because that is true, friends and family are staying there. Are we also opening it up to the public? Absolutely we were. And we were because, as a reminder, we met the code enforcement officer in the first 30 minutes that we moved to town, because our neighbor had called us since there were porta potties in our backyard. And when the code enforcement officer learned that this is our primary residence, that was the contingency of the loan and would have been loan fraud if we were doing anything else, that we're voting members here in this community, we own the home and we plan to own it, then we were given the green light to go ahead with camping. And it wasn't ever an issue until this year. This year, for whatever reason, I can only assume that it's because there's a new code enforcement officer, and perhaps people are getting down to the nitty gritty with the code, and that's fine. But with the parking for your tenants, there, and our neighbors specifically, we know our neighbors don't park. Is there an issue or like a moment where one person can lose their spot? Yes, that's possible. That's possible with anyone going downtown. That's possible with anyone anywhere. But we do ask our guests and have asked them to move their cars and leave those specific spaces open so that people can park in front of their homes. We've also learned that this is not permitted and maybe should be a consideration, is that the houses that do offer camping or the houses that have residents and don't have off-street parking be able to put parking cones and no parking in front of their homes specifically for their guests. I know that the cones aren't required or aren't permitted now, but it certainly helps control the parking for the residents because they should be able to park there. A lot of those points that were brought could have been addressed directly to me, and I am constantly ignored. Once I said hello to my neighbor and he just turned around and walked away. So I can't fix ordinance during the week of the rally. This, to my knowledge, was also just put into effect last year in response to camping at another event somewhere else for Meade County, and the exception being during rally. I was just as irritated with my husband hearing about the noise in the karaoke as probably my neighbors, and we have decided that moving forward, there would be a shutdown of noise at 10 o'clock on the weekdays, which is a half hour before the city ordinance on regular days, and at midnight on the weekends, in respect or to be respectful of our neighbors. When we went and got assigned petitions seeking support from our neighbors to do camping, the only two that didn't sign it is the one to the north of us that believes that we are just here because to benefit from rally and we're not residents, so they made assumptions about us. It's not my fault they don't have the facts. And the people to the south of us. And one of two things, the landlord to the south of us, their tenant signed our petition.
Christina?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
You know, tonight we're considering whether or not to adjust the ordinance.
Right.
I mean, listening to the pieces, while it's a compelling story. I can't answer why our code enforcer was not enforcing our codes, but I can say that our code enforcement officer now has brought these forward, and it's up for the council now to consider. So I'm going to ask the council to make a decision on this. We're approaching 7:30 on this.
I'm sorry. May I just ask one thing? Like, initially we came here to receive relief from the ordinance. Understanding what we have understood over the time, the biggest thing as to why we can't receive relief is because we advertise to the public. So if we're just opening up our backyard for friends and family and not collecting a fee that is advertised, are we allowed to have camping? Can we be permitted relief of the ordinance for the 2026 season?
As long as it's one campsite under the current ordinance.
We would have to look at the code, and that goes to a staff determination, not a council determination. Not prepared to, I don't have the information that I need right now, and I've not conducted the analysis to answer that question confidently.
Understood. Did that answer your question for now anyway?
For now, anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Council, what do you want to do?
I agree with Jesse and Ruth's premonition on this, and if we do end up with having a permit, it needs to be affordable. That's my opinion.
Both of y'all raised a lot of really great questions, which needs to be looked at when we're putting together any changes to this ordinance. Is there a way for y'all to send us all your points, because we talked a lot, and a lot of great questions were brought up, and a lot of good points on both sides, so that we could have them before we get to our ordinance committee meeting, so that we can review all those as we move forward to the next step. Y'all can email them to me if you want, and I'll bring
Is
it
there
to
a next step? I mean, the council needs to make a decision.
Well, I would like there to be a next step.
Well, are you ready for a motion?
Well, I guess we gotta do that.
And I don't know if we need to frame it as a motion. I mean, if that is what the council wants to direct, is for me. But like, I think what I might be picking up on this is to come up with a memo. Staff will identify some of the issues. We'll visit with DOH. We will just kind of outline some ideas of what the council might be regulating. I think the discussion tonight and the hour we've spent goes to this issue of public comment and having the ordinance subcommittee review this. I just don't think it's productive until we have something. I mean, we could definitely burn through 20 hours bringing people up to talk about their experiences and their experiences with their neighbors and why this is important. But I think it's going to be more productive if we have a framework that we can discuss. Okay, ordinance section 1A sub 1B. Let's address that. Does that make sense? Just to kind of facilitate discussion a little bit. Otherwise, we're just talking in circles and there's nothing being done. So logistically, that would be my suggestion moving forward, is if it is the council's desire to at least consider the possibility of allowing some commercial public camping, which is not allowed now under city ordinance, to do the back work that we need to do with the Department of Health, to do the analysis that staff needs to do, to come back with the council with a little bit more information, move forward there with first reading, second reading, and we can have a public hearing, and the place for people to submit public comments would be at that public hearing, and it could be either in person or in writing, but then at least they're talking about something like what the council is proposing.
Eric, you said no motion, but honestly, I think there needs to be direction provided. I mean, we heard so far from 3 of our counselors. There's the timeline consideration about meeting expectations. Honestly, I hope we solve some rally-related things before we have to jump on this 100%. Not that I'm against the camping piece, but we've got some big-ticket items that we need to work with, and I mean, it's going to be hard for us to keep every iron hot in that fire.
And to be clear, I have no issues with a motion so long as it's worded clearly enough for me to be able to act on it. And so I guess the motion that I would be suggesting, based on the discussion that I've heard tonight, is I think I can probably be back to you on some sort of report that at least will drive future conversation. It won't be a draft of a first reading of an ordinance, because we haven't had the conversation of what's going to be in there. I'm happy to come up with that if that's what the council wants, but that's kind of what I would like to limit it to now. I feel like I anticipate at this moment, do have some other issues on the front burner, but I could come up with something for you at least to move this discussion forward by the October 20th meeting. The other option is to leave the ordinance exactly as it is, and we'll enforce it.
There you go, thank you. So within those pieces, Eric has indicated that the 20th, I mean, they can have the administrative side of the discussion at least presented, so that we could have further discussion. Or, I guess without a motion and a second, or a failed vote, we keep the ordinance the same and enforce it as it's written.
I would make a motion that we have that discussion on October 20th at that meeting, and that staff and is able to come forward with everything that we need to be able to have that sort of framework to have that discussion that is productive.
I'd second it.
Okay, we've got a first by Ruth, a second by Tony to bring forward an ordinance change. Just kind of preliminary discussion on October 20th. Is there any further discussion? Bonnie, you had a question, or is it covered at this point? No?
May I ask, the last time we had a meeting, FEMA was brought up in the floodplain as to whether this could even happen. Has that gone away, or what's the issue with FEMA?
We're still working on it.
Okay, so they've not given us a definitive solution.
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
Bonnie?
I just want to point to a couple of things, and I think, Kevin, you said it so well. The intent, the purpose is to protect, not overburden. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. At the same time, your thought was that first reading is not too late and that you're not unwilling to consider changes at that point. But I have to tell you, historically, councils have not been willing to take input at first readings. And so I like your position, but I would like it to hold up, because we do get to that first reading and it's like, whoa, this didn't go the direction we thought it was going to. So that point, I think there is some room for, I would call it education, but that's not really the right term. But this town has to have realistic expectations about the rally and balance what the rally does for us and what it costs us in non-monetary terms. I happen to live not too far from One-Eyed Jack's. I never plan on going to sleep before 1 a.m. because the bar shuts down, the bikes clear the street, the bus picks up a block from my house. You know, it's just not realistic for me to think I'm going to settle down before then. I've lived with that for the last 50 years. It's the rally. It's the price I pay for what the rally does for my town. There was, you made a mention of not being sure what the intent of the ordinance was. And I think as we go through these processes that we're clear about intent and purpose. And you said, well, was the point of the ordinance to push campers out of town, out to the commercial campgrounds? And maybe it was. But is that what we want to do? I think we need to think about that. My people like to be in town because they can walk from where they're staying downtown, imbibe as much as they wish, get home safely without any tickets or without any accidents. There's something to be said for those folks who don't want to be at Party Hardy Buffalo Chip or 7 miles out at Full Throttle or whatever. So who are we serving? So those are just some points that have kind of surfaced as we've talked here.
Bonnie,
And
can I get you to hold
Yes.
on to what the motion and the second is here?
I know, that's where I'm going, is that I think it is important that we start with what are the statutory limitations on what we can do. But I think we also need to make use of the fact that the state is not real anxious to nitpick with us as long as we're taking care of it. So I would hope that what we do ordinance-wise considers all of these things. I don't own the public street. I can't park in front of my house if there's a sporting event at the middle school. That's just the way it is.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll call the question here. We've had a motion and a second to reevaluate this, come forward at the October 20th meeting with an administrative side review and continue the process of a ordinance rewrite after that. Is that correct? Those in favor of that motion indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. That motion is carried. Thank you, Eric. Item 7 is the mayor's report. 2 items on that, reference ambulance staffing. We're happy to keep that team strong. Is there any questions on those 2 items? Item 8 is the consent agenda, items to be considered as a whole. There's 3 items on here. 2 sets of minutes, September 15th, City Council. I guess it's just listed twice. It's PDF and HTML. So there's only 2 items on the consent agenda. And the second is setting a public hearing for a variance for side setback requirements, abutting residential zoned area for Tim and Jill Edson. Does anybody wish to have one of those items, those 2 items removed and considered separately? Again, that's just setting a public hearing and approving council minutes from September 15th. Is there anyone willing to make a motion on the consent calendar?
Kevin, would you clarify what constitutes a public hearing on an issue so that people have reasonable expectations as to what will take place?
Thank you. Eric will cover that for us.
Public hearings are set by statute. It's a requirement that Board of Adjustments consider variances under state law. It is state law that we're required to have a public hearing. That would be an opportunity for anyone from the public to come in and speak to the request. In addition, members of the public can submit written comment that will become part of the record. And it would be up to, in this case, the chair of the Board of Adjustment, which would also be the mayor, to put any kind of reasonable limitations on the time allowed for public comment, whether that was to say we'll take an hour and divide it up that way, or to set a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minute limit per person. That would be at the discretion of the chair. But it is an opportunity for anyone in the public to submit written comments to the record or to make their comments to the Board of Adjustment in this case.
It's good, Bonnie?
Thank you, Eric. That was
Yeah,
perfect.
thank you, Eric. All right, we didn't get a motion or a second on the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
We've got a first by Nick. Was that second by Terry? Jim. Second by Jim to approve the consent agenda. Those in favor of the motion indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. That's carried. Item 9 is approval of the claims. Any questions on the claims? It's a condensed piece. MDU is tough to pay for municipalities because they have a real quick turnaround on their billing. When we get the bill, they expect payment within 10 days, and when we only meet every 2 weeks.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Can I ask about one item?
Yes.
The very first item on the very first page.
There was diligent corporation.
Very first item on the first page.
I'm trying to get to it.
Looks like diligent corporation for.
It's for iCompass Meeting and Management Program.
That's our, go ahead, Ann.
That is iCompass, which is the portal that you can go into to pull up the agendas and the packets and what we use for the meetings.
Is that an annual fee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry, you made a motion to approve the claims. Was there a second? I think I jumped the gun. Nick had a second on that. Any further discussion on the claims? Those in favor indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. All right, we took care of the claims. We have no public hearings tonight. Item 11 is reports. 11.1 is the 2026 budget hearings. Aaron, do you want to kind of carry some of the?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. What we got in front of you today is 8 or 9 budgets from the general fund for a continuation of our conversation, the budget hearings that we had last meeting. So these are the kind of most of the final for the general. There's insurance, and the IT one is not a part of this package. Again, This is just an opportunity for the department heads to kind of, showcase what their needs and their wants are for their budgets. We also recognize that, at the end of the day, we need to have a balanced budget, and we're not going to get everything we want. But it's important that you guys at least see what they believe their needs and wants are. Again, we have been kind of curtailing our expenditures over the last couple of years, and so some things that we haven't done. And you can only do that for so long before you have to either replace equipment, do some training, buy some supplies and materials. So again, with that, I'll start off with the police department and Chief Vanderwater.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Aaron, did you want to talk about personnel or salaries and wages, or did we want to just get into some of the operations?
Sure, and I'll just hit off right, up in front of you. One of the things that we did this year with this particular budget is that we put all the personnel within the law enforcement, and then you also have the non-certified law enforcement. That's your code enforcing officer, and then also the administrative coordinator for the law enforcement. The ones up on top are your police officers, your sergeants, your detectives, and your police officers. You can see down below, looking at where we are today for 2025, we're at 1.11. What we've spent so far, we budgeted 1.4. You can see what we spent for the 90 people that came in that were law enforcement support, security, and a couple other support personnel for the rally. We spent about 170,000 on regular pay for those 90 individuals, and we spent 121,661 in overtime for those. This next year, we projected that to be a little bit less. Our intent is we'll continue to provide law enforcement, but we'll not necessarily get into the security aspects of providing security for different businesses like Harley Davidson and those type of things. At least that's our intent. Now, as we work agreements with those entities for space here in the rally, maybe some things can change, but our intent is for them to be able to provide their own security, and for Jody to focus in on those law enforcement folks to be able to provide, public safety on the streets and within the city limits of Sturgis. So that's where we sit on the personnel side of it. You can see the overall cost went up from 1.4 to 1.6. I'll say that's a little bit of a, if you go back and look at our budgets, for many years, we've always budgeted, I think it was like 128,000 for overtime. And every year we would more than double that. But each year we'd start over. This year we're going to be at 128,000. Would never been 128,000. So this budget is providing you a number that we think is more real. It does reduce a little bit because, again, we're trying to get out of the security business, stay in the law enforcement aspects of it. But it's true to what the cost has been over the last couple of years. It's not just a number to make it look good, but the number that we think we need to be able to execute, bringing those additional law enforcement in to provide public safety. So that's all I have there. Jody, if you want to continue on.
I'm going to move on down to professional fees unless you guys want me to go line by line. For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of streamline this a little bit. But a lot of these numbers reflect comparable to 2024 numbers. As we all have, we made some major cuts to fit into the box and being a good team player for 2025. And we've continued to do that by curbing our spending. And we're trying to get more back in line to get caught up on some of this stuff. So some of our numbers are reflective back into 2024 numbers. So starting with our professional fees, and if there's questions on what these are or anything, some of these are still tied to animal shelter. There'll be a zero balance next to it. And those are because they've been moved into the animal shelter. The animal shelter, this will be the second year that it's been separated from the police department's budget to get more in line to show cost analysts. But and then new this year is we have code enforcement. We're hoping that a lot of his wages, his expenses with vehicles and some of his records management system will just absorb into our overall budget. So But if you look here, we have professional fees are pretty much the same compared to 2024. Rent is the same. Rent is just our our monthly contract with our copy machine that we have. We move into our repairs and maintenance, as you can see, for the different type of vehicles that we have there, from our primary patrol cars, our secondary patrol cars, which could be some of our older patrol cars. Our non-patrol vehicles could be some of our administrative detective vehicles, and that's where the code enforcement would fall in. And then some of our specialty vehicles, our side-by-sides, our motorcycles, etc. So some of the other stuff down there is, sorry, my eyes, I'm getting old. And these are some fine fonts here, but some of these other charges are for buying new equipment, whether that's a radar or PBTs, etc. So you can see there's a significant change from 2025 budget to 2026 budget, and that's just also due to, as we spoke, Mayor, with the roof that's supposedly going to be coming out of the 2025 budget still. Talking with the county folks, they should be starting that this week or next week. So, and Ben's hoping to have that completed and out of his budget before the end of this year. So that may have a significant change on some of our IT stuff that we spoke about. Continuing on down through our supplies, it's just some standard stuff. If you look, pretty much the same across the board from the years previous. Some of the stuff that sticks out is some of our less lethal. We're looking at trying to continue to add to our fleet with our less lethal equipment. We currently have some beanbag shotgun rounds. We have tasers. We're looking to add less lethal 40 millimeter rounds that shoot out a non-lethal bullets and ammunition. So. Some of the other stuff that you see with the increases are like camera supplies. That's for looking at purchasing new car camera systems. They're anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000, depending on what we replace or purchase. Pretty much all the other expenses under some of our utilities, our training, they're all the same as years past. Pretty much relatively the same, other than we've added back in deer depredation. We've done that last 2 years. I think we did not do that due to budgeting, but should we start doing counts and we have a major influx of deer throughout the year, we can do a deer study with the Department of Game Fish and Parks, and then that fee there helps to process the deer for the citizens that request the deer. Then also adding down the other increases are trying to include and increase our tactical response or special response team. We currently have 3 officers. We're working on bringing in some paramedics from the ambulance and getting them trained, as well as bringing on additional staff, so that a resource here at home that we don't have to rely on South Dakota Highway Patrol or the Pennington County SRTs. They're probably a couple hours out at minimum to from the time to call to by the time they get together and everybody gets up here to handle the situation. Our guys we've been training hand in hand, side by side with Pennington County and Highway Patrol for the last 2 years now.
Hey, Jody, I think that's also, you've been tackling this situation over several years, right? The need's been there. I think you've kind of taken it like 3 this year, 3 that next year type of situation. So you just continue on with, having your full team have the right equipment, PPE equipment, to be able to respond to active shooters and those kind of type of events, as I understand it.
Yes, correct, Aaron. Yes, we started with, and we've just slowly every year as budget allows, increased that throughout and building on our program, adding with our training, our equipment that we have, and then also our staffing. Pretty much same across the board under the rally expenses when it comes to housing and feeding our rally staff. Not much has changed there. Get down in some of the major increases that you'll see here is under our machine equipment. We have not purchased a vehicle in over a year, and we've actually started seeing that. You know, our cars run almost 24/7, unfortunately, with the staffing that we currently have, and so they do take a beating. And in fact, one of our new ones, I think, is probably getting close to 40,000 miles on it for, what has it been, almost a year and a half, if not higher mileage. So we're trying to look at outfitting a new vehicle. And we're kind of shooting from the hip here with my couple of my vehicle guys of looking at what they have to offer, which is very slim on the state bid, but between the state bid for new SUV vehicles along with our outfitting with the equipment, you know, a computer, laptop, a cage, and then also our cameras and radar detectors. It's quite a big, it's probably 15 to 20 grand just on equipment alone. So. And then another increase that you'll see that we're going to need, it's definitely a need, not a want, is every 5 years we have to replace our vest, our bulletproof vest for our employees. Manufacturers only warranty them for 5 years, and 2026 they will be expiring, so we need to outfit those all of our full-time employees with and part-time employees with a new vest. So that's quick and fast there for the PD budget, but if there's any questions from council, I'd be happy to ask.
One random one. What do you do with the old vests?
The old vests, like I said, they're still good, but we've used them for training. We've also hand me down to some of our newer reserves. You know, our reserve program sits there pretty good financially, so they're able to purchase new ones. But should there be that lapse in time to order, it could be a couple months in ordering, so we'll let them use them. But they sit there and get reused for that, or we may use them for some different trainings. Doing some ballistic testing when we're shooting rounds and stuff. Some of our firearms guru guys use them for training and testing our ballistics. No questions, move on to animal shelter and be out of your guys' hair. So pretty much we have 2 employees there full-time. As you can see, them numbers, they're pretty much the same. We try to do what we can with the 2 of them. We've historically had part-timers, but unfortunately it's tough to keep a part-timer there, and their availability's been slim to none, but so sometimes you will see an increase with that overtime on the wages. Then moving down to our professional fees, the euthanization, vaccines, and dumping fees, the words probably don't do it justice. Those are predominantly veterinarian. When we have to go and we bring in an animal, they will go to the vet clinic, get seen, and those are costs incurred for there. And then vaccinations. And same with the number 2 with our veterinary expenses. You know, if we have sometimes if we have a dog hit at 10 o'clock at night, we may be stuck with having to run that dog down to Rapid or calling in a vet at Northern Hills here. And sometimes the vet at Northern Hills may suggest us, due to the injuries, running straight down to the emergency room in Rapid, and that emergency room vet makes you pay on the spot there before you leave.
Before you go on, Aaron, do you think it's prudent to make a change to that 4220 item 1 to change that to something that follows better than what the chief said there?
You said Eric, are you talking to me, or?
Well, I was looking at you, but I must have said Eric. I'm sorry.
So I wasn't, okay.
In my brain tonight, they're one and the same, I guess. So.
Okay.
Apologies.
Restate the question, please.
4220 professional fees. Item 1 is euthanization, vaccines, and dumping fees.
Sure.
I agree with the chief's statement on that, that's probably not.
Yeah, I'll have to.
One of the other things I failed to mention is a couple years ago it was placed in there. You'll see in the 2025 budget that $20,000 was a use for donations that was put in there as a means of finance. I think it gave us a false understanding that there was potentially $20,000 for us to spend. So just to get some more clear picture on zero-based budgeting, we removed that for the sake.
We'll take a look at it though and see what's better wording for that, better description.
Thank you. I mean, that's not a bottom line number deal, but clarity in
Moving on down to repairs and maintenance, we were blessed to have Rick and his staff give us one of the old pickup trucks from the used to belong to the rally department, so the girls have used that, but there's still a need for some potential getting that refurbished to make sure that it's fitting for the use and the need that we have of getting animals in there and keeping them safely corralled so they're not jumping out of the vehicle, and that they're able to be kenneled in there safely while we transport them. We've also trying to work on doing some continual upgrades to the building. As you know, and a couple years ago we put in a extra cat room. We are looking at trying to get some dog runs installed there so that the staff has the availability that should they have a vicious dog, they can kick that dog out through the dog door and let them go out and use the restroom without having to put themselves in harm's way should it be a vicious dog or violent dog. So pretty much everything else is kind of across the board there the same. You know, on our food and supplies, we've been very fortunate and blessed by the citizens of Sturgis and Meade County with donations over the years, and so they have donated a lot of food and supplies for not only for the dogs but also for the cats as well. So we've been able to save some money there. And then of course our gas, and then they fall under with the uniform allowance that they're required. And then we try to stay up on our training as well for keeping our girls trained up on any animal laws with the South Dakota Animal Association board there. So, and then our utilities are pretty much just set by the rates with what we tried to get it zero based of what we used over year to year. So, and I think that's about it there. Is there any questions from the animal shelter side of it?
There was a post I saw today before I came in, that we talked about this earlier, about a cat that was left out front. I don't know if you guys saw that. And I don't know, it's concerning that the property isn't surveilled for them to even see. I mean, prosecution is one thing. We should be able to see who is going to and from the property at all times. I think the camera system probably should be updated there.
And we do have a camera system, like Nick and I talked offline before the meeting, and unfortunately that camera system was put in over probably 10 years, and it's kind of it's into life, you know, as electronics and electrical equipment does. But yes, I would agree, we probably need to look at updating some camera system, even if we do some self-contained units, I would say. So I'll visit with the girls and see what they have and how everything is going with what they currently have. I know we've talked about the camera system not being able to function properly. The quality's changed, and it's not as high quality as it could probably be nowadays. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
The next budget up is fire department. You know, I can present this. I know, Mark, I saw that you're out there. I wasn't sure if you wanted, from the fire board perspective, to talk it.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Mark Brook, Officer with Sturgis Fire Department. I guess I'm wearing my Sturgis Fire Department hat tonight, representing. Scott, our chief, put together the budget, and we met with Aaron the other day and went over it. I really don't have very much to say about it. I guess I was volunteered to show up since our chief is on duty in Rapid City, to try to answer any questions. So I guess I would prefer if you can present.
Wanted to give you the opportunity. For the most part, it's very similar to 2025. And I mean, you can look across from the salaries perspective, went from 27,557 to 28,103. You know, our overtime is the same. FICA is pretty much the same. No change with memberships. So really, if you just kind of go through all the way down to different activities, you know, from repair and maintenance, supply and materials, it's pretty straightforward. One thing that we need to do, we do have a contract with the fire board that goes through 2025 for the volunteer fire department. And so we do need to update that contract and enter into a new contract, you know, for whatever that time period's going to be starting in 2026. Mark and I have had that conversation. I visited a bit with Chief Vanderwater. We just need to get the team together and look at the current contract. You know, what do we like about it? You know, what some proposed changes are, and then be able to move forward on that.
I guess the only other comment I would have in here is, as obviously as we look back at 2023 and 2024, and again, you know, being a team player in this, there was a lot cut from back then, and everybody can see what those items are in supplies and training and so on. But one thing I guess I would, and under supplies and materials, we've got bunker gear there, and it's sitting at 5293. And just to give you an idea, that one probably is going to have to move in the future. It costs about $4,000 for a set of bunker gear anymore, and the NFPA, basically they've got a 10-year maximum service life. I guess it's similar to the vests that Jody was talking about. So we're sitting at about 41 members right now. So obviously if you get 10 years in life out of those and 40 members, that number needs to be more in the 12 to 16 neighborhood. But you know, just on the life safety part of it. But other than that, I guess if there's any questions, I'll try to answer.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Good job shucking the job over to Aaron there.
Next budget up is
Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to go through ours pretty quick. I've got the next several budgets that end up being in the Public Works budgets. For 2026, the Public Work budget amounts are more closely aligned with the 2024 budgets. This is reflecting our intention to return to more of a proactive maintenance routine rather than continuing in a reactive mode. This approach emphasizes planned upkeep, life cycle management, and efficiency in addressing infrastructure needs before they become critical. Overall, the 2026 budget is designed to stabilize the spending levels while responsibly addressing the city's growing infrastructure footprint. This balance ensures that we can sustain reliable operations, protect past investments, and provide residents with safe and well-maintained infrastructure. For the streets budget, one of the primary factors influencing the 2026 budget is the expansion of our maintenance responsibilities. As you're all aware, in 2026, the city will assume full maintenance obligations for several new roadways, including Avalanche, Alder Place, portions of Alkali, and several new subdivision roads. These additions represent a significant increase in the street mileage and infrastructure under our care, which directly impacts staffing, material, and equipment needs. As you'll see in the street numbers, Some of the things that increased significantly was our supplies and materials. When we look at, for example, control, gravel, we had to increase those. We're almost doubling our gravel road maintenance program with the addition of Avalanche Road. Other things just for the most part stayed even with the 2024. We did do significant cuts in 2025, but when we did those, we knew that we couldn't sustain those levels. Some of the things that we did bring in, PubWorks software, we moved that again to more streamline and for a little bit more transparency and ease of tracking. We moved all that underneath of the streets instead of splitting out with several other divisions. That's about all that we really had. We did add in a line item under, where did we add that into? Yeah, repair and maintenance. We did add in a $20,000 line item for emergency street repairs. That gives Aaron and I the flexibility to make repairs that are not regularly scheduled, such as what we had to do right after the rally up on Sherman Street. We had about a $15,000 street repair up there that was unscheduled. And that gives us the flexibility to be able to do those without having to come back for an appropriation from the council. That's about all I have for the street budget, unless any of you have any questions on streets.
Just note on that 4250, during the legal and finance, we talked about changing that terminology and not necessarily calling it emergency repair because there may be other conditions, that need to do it. So we'll just have a street repair and take out the emergency based on your comments during your legal and finance. Go ahead there, Rick.
Next up is the parks budget. For 2026, the park budget reflects a return to many of our routine maintenance items, allowing for the division to focus on consistent upkeep of the park's facilities and the grounds. This proactive approach ensures that our parks remain safe, attractive, and functional for the residents and the visitors. One of the more significant changes for the 2026 budget is the equipment lease line item for the tractor that is used to operate our 15-foot rotary mower. This lease cost has increased to $15,000 per year and will be held under a 5-year agreement. Well, this represents a notable increase compared to previous years. Leasing this equipment continues to be the most cost-effective option when compared to the purchase of and long-term maintenance of a mower of this size and capability. The lease structure also allows the department to benefit from reliable, updated equipment without the burden of large upfront capital costs. Some of the other things we did do is that we did consolidate, and you'll see that in the, I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between the parks and the cemetery. We did remove all of the full-time employment out of the cemetery budget, move that into the parks. Some of that was a little bit of a realignment, that rather than employing dedicated staff paid solely from the cemetery budget, we now utilize the parks maintenance operators to perform these duties. This approach provides for greater flexibility and resilience between the two divisions to be shared where they are most needed while reducing the overall personal costs. Some of the things that we'll be continuing to work on through 26 into 27 is the addition of the maintenance underneath of the parks, and City Administrator Jordan and I are still working through how all that looks, but the hopes are for 2027 anyways, that will all probably be moved underneath of the parks budget. It may have individual line items for those, for the facility maintenance, but it will likely be all moved over underneath along with the custodial. Some of the other things that we did do in the cemetery budget was we moved the full cost of the Sims cemetery software that was usually split between cemetery and the finance budgets. Again, this adjustment just improves the transparency and allows for more accurate tracking of those cemetery-related expenditures. Finally, we did add a new maintenance line item for our recently established scatter garden to the cemetery budget, not knowing really what we have, being that it's the first year, we'll have to continue to build that budget. One of the other things that City Administrator Jordan and I talked about is the need for some ongoing maintenance at the cemetery, such as some road maintenance, things of that nature. And we're still continuing to discuss whether we want to build those into the budget or if they would actually end up being a capital improvement expenditure and placed on our capital improvement plan. With that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
You go through fleet?
Fleet's pretty simple. Fleet is all, pretty much all wages. We have a small amount of supplies and materials that are generally associated with the shop. Everything else gets billed out to the individual department for the piece of equipment that we're working on. For example, if they're working on a piece of equipment that's assigned to the water department, then those repairs and costs associated with it get billed out to that department. So really, when we look at the fleet, all we have is the salaries and wages, and then we have about $16,000 worth of shop supplies, gasoline, and uniforms. Other than that, we have one cell phone.
Can we go back to the parks for just a second?
Sure.
There was a line item in there for brick ceiling. Is that Rally Point brick ceiling?
Some of that's Rally Point. We have some bricks across the street. We have some bricks here at City Hall. That sealer is Decro sealer is pretty expensive stuff, so yep.
Thank you.
Any questions for Rick? Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Next up would be Raleigh and sponsorship with Lance Shear.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The proposed 2026 rally and sponsorship budget reflects an emphasis on assessing learned lessons from the first 8 months of the combined 2025 budget we are currently operating under, identifying both efficiencies and gaps, as well as incorporating planned updates. Beginning with professional fees, unless Administrator Jordan would like to start elsewhere. Thank you. Professional fees. Some of the notable changes with the 2026 budget would be the discontinuation of the brick project, thereby the installation of the bricks, and also the sponsorship commission residual payments we've made for the last 10 years. That total reduction for professional fees is $24,595. Moving on to publishing, I've added about $4,000 to that for the magazine publication, the official publication for the rally, and the removal of the hosting fees associated with the events and Superstore. For the rent line item, with the property leases and associated expenses that we are discontinuing, that will remove about $200,000 from the 2025 budget for a total of $112,594. Repairs and maintenance, see a jump of about $570 for computer updates, as well as some preventive maintenance in the VIP facility each year during the rally. Supplies and maintenance will see a slight jump of about $3,100 associated with the catering needs around the VIP, the different receptions, and the mayor's ride. Travel and training and travel rather, I've added to that budget for an increase of $4,500. Utilities, we'll see a reduction associated with the Wi-Fi and cellular reorganization currently in the rally budget. Other expenses should see a decrease of close to $4,000 related to Superstore and ride registrations. The next item, machinery and equipment, is not applicable to sponsorship or rally. Merchandise for resale. Without the Superstore, we should save about $4,000. With that, the net reduction $132,000, and that would give us a grand total for expenses for rally and sponsorship together of about $585,000. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just some other comments. You know, the biggest chunk of that reduction is, you know, we're not leasing out Sampson Corner, the parking lot over, you know, by the bowling alley. That's the most significant piece of it. You know, this, you can see it's all on one spreadsheet, but there are two separate departments here. You have the rally, what we called rally and events, and then we had the sponsorship department. You know, there's been some discussions between Lance and I in terms of, you know, what does the future look like in terms of what department budgets do we have? Do we have a department that's rally and sponsorships, and then we have another department that's non-rally events? So those are things that we can, you know, talk about, you know, in terms of, right now I think for 2026, you know, we have two departments. We have 4199, which is, I don't remember which one is that, the rally one, and 4198 is actually sponsorship. We'll probably split up the spreadsheet because it's kind of difficult to sometimes see that piece of it because there are two separate departments there. And when you go into our financial software, Cassell, it's broken up that way, and then you can kind of figure out, you know, what you're spending against each of those different activities. But I think in the long term, that would be, you know, an opportunity for us to maybe fine tune that if that's what we choose to do. The other piece of it, we are making some assumptions here because we're working with some unknowns. We only have two sponsorships that are continuous into 2026. All the rest of them end here in 2025. And so, you know, do we have VIPs? Do we have a mayor's ride? You know, those are all questions to be answered here in the near future as we move into 2026, you know, for us to be able to plan whatever that event looks like. But, you know, we know that there may be some changes, and the guidance that I gave Lance was, and let's just assume that, you know, status quo for the most part, that, you know, we're going to have been over the last couple of years. So this one's kind of a moving piece because I'm not telling you anything you don't know when it comes down to the rally and on sponsorships and what the approaches we're going to take for long-term sponsorships and those kind of questions that, you know, we're going to be looking at and making some decisions on here sometime in the future. So pending your questions, that's basically what we have for the rest of this. You know, when we first put the plan together, the intent was to do the first reading on October 6th. That was probably overly aggressive, And, you know, so we are pushing the first reading back, just allow us, I feel pretty comfortable with the general funds. As I kind of opening comments, that we recognize that our needs and wants probably exceed the means that we have available to appropriate to those, and so we're going to have to make some tough decisions. The guidance I've given to the department heads is, again, you're trying to, not take the same risk each year, and that you're spreading that around. So in some areas, like you've heard some of the department heads, well, we haven't done this in a while. Well, those things we may want to do in 2026, but there may be some things where we've been doing that we may have to come back on. It just, once we have an understanding what our revenue's coming in, we can bounce that off against the expenses in the general account and our general fund and kind of see where we sit. At the end of the day, the guidance is to have a structurally balanced budget, meaning that our expenses match the revenues that are coming in. We still have some work to do on our enterprise funds. For the most part, I feel pretty comfortable when it comes down to the expenses on most of the activities. We still have to do some work on some of the revenue projections, particularly when you're talking about the public works aspects of that. We need to do some work on understanding some of our debt service, get our restricted funding understanding with the surcharges. So there's some work that we still need to do to dot the I's and cross the T's when it comes down to the enterprise fund. We do have the special funds. We've started to work on those, the capital improvements, the equipment replacement, but we have multiple other ones that we need to kind of tackle. So the intent right now is the recommendation is to have our first reading on that first meeting in November, which is consistent with what our ordinance is right now. That's the no later time to be able to do your first reading and then second reading in that second meeting in November. Probably that's good because we also got some rally camping work to do also. So that's kind of where we sit on the budget. I was hoping we would be a little farther ahead, but I feel pretty good about the process. I've learned a lot, but I would tell you all the department heads have too. In the past, and I've talked to some of you individually on this in some of our committees, we had one or two people that was doing all the fishing for us, right? They would give a number, here's what you need to budget to, and you as the council probably were not aware of what those issues were in those departments and the challenges that they had because they were just trying to manage to a number. And as we were working through this budget process, I'd ask some very specific questions on their budget, and a lot of times the response was, I don't know. I have never been involved in this process before. So the intent is here, as we've gone through this, is understand the tools that we have, and we have considerable tools. When we look at our financial software, Cassell, we have the Connect Online, and that provides, if it doesn't, we have to provide all those different aspects of that different online software to be able to manage a budget. The intent is that you provided us is that every month, in that second meeting of the month, that we'll be providing you a financial report. And that's basically where do we stand against what we budgeted, both in revenue and expense. The majority of the onus of being correct on those reports is more on the department head. It is on the finance director and Berlato. And so it's important that we give all those department heads all those tools so they can manage those budgets, understand what those expenses are. And if we are going to feel like we're going to be going over an activity line like 4250 that we've been talking about tonight, that we're giving you guys a heads up on that and maybe a recommendation on how that would be funded. At the end of the day, for the end of the year, I should say, we got to stay within our budget within that department. So if we're short in one activity, you don't necessarily have to do a supplement to push into another one. But we don't necessarily want that to be the end state. We want to be able to continue to communicate, make sure that the council's aware of what our spending is against each of the activities within those departments. And again, the onus on that for that clarity for you is going to be more on the department heads. And so myself and Ann and them working together, we need to give them the tools, educate them on those tools so they can manage those budgets. So again, everybody knows how to fish. And if we have somebody that goes off, onto another job or retirement, we have a hole to fill. it's not so significant because the majority of the understanding of development of that particular task, in this case being the budget, it's spread around across all of the departments. So we're not trying to, we don't have the situation that we're in right now where, we're trying to learn something altogether that very few of us have had the opportunity to work in the past. So with that, I feel pretty comfortable. I think we've learned a lot. I think I see the understanding. I see the desire to control their budgets, to be able to manage those budgets and have the tools to be able to do it. And, at the end of the day, that's what I'm looking for, is that desire to have that responsibility and be accountable to that. So I guess pending your questions, that's all we have on tonight's budget hearing.
Thank you, Aaron. I think it's important to note that, we have made some adjustments to our first reading schedule for the budget, but it's for good reason. It gives us a chance to continue to collect some more data and some other cases, and gets us to a spot where our reconciliation process is more complete, and I think those are all prudent reasons to adjust the schedule. Nonetheless, there's a lot of work yet to do on the budget. The hard work hasn't started yet. The hardest of the work, how about that? Any other comments? All right, well, continuing to agenda item 11.2, by state law, the City of Sturgis needs to certify to the Meade County Auditor's Office by the 1st of October the anticipated levy for the 2026 property tax year. So tonight there needs to be a decision made on what that levy amount is. Aaron has prepared a very, very comprehensive report on that, and I'll let him talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I'd direct yourself to that report, and you can see what we budgeted for 2025, and that was $3,131,226. And based on our overall auditor certified growth value for last year, that came up to $4.13 per 1,000 for a mill levy of. So this year we looked at with the county, what is the max that we could take if we chose to, if you chose to. And so the max would increase that by $124,552 up to $3,256,078. So currently, we're paying $413 per 1,000 assessed value. This would move it up to $414 per 100,000 of assessed value. If you did keep the property tax right where it is right now and maintain $3,131,226, you're around, let me put that in real quick. That equals $3.98. So that'd be 0.00398 on the mill levy if you maintained at 3.131. So those are kind of the, I guess we could be lower than that, I guess, if that's what we chose. That may not be the recommendation. We are a little underwhelming on sales tax. However, we did get the first part of September for the 1% that goes into the general fund between the 1st and the 19th of September. We were at $340,000 or $344,000. Last year we were at $380,000. So depending on what we get for the last part of September, we're kind of in that ballpark of maybe achieving what we were hoping to get for this year. But we have been trending downwards on our sales tax. We had anticipated we'd be at 2.6. Now looking at the numbers, I'd say 2.4 might be where we at for the 1% that goes into the general fund. And as we look at 2026, we'll probably want to kind of take a conservative approach on what we think we're going to get in 2026, unless we think that it's going to be a banner year in terms of, I guess, economics here in our area. But the assumption is that we'll probably continue to trend kind of where we're at, not as far as where we wanted to be, but not necessarily, in territory that's, it's pretty scary. So With that, I guess on where we want to be with the mill levy for 2026.
Thank you, Aaron. I'd like to add, you know, I've had a problem with some people's reference to the mill levy's gone down for a specific amount of time, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, some version of that, while the tax burden goes up. And the reason for that is because we've been growing. Our value is actually going up. So the mill levy does need to go down. The county assessor has indicated in some correspondence that you know, we're seeing a flattening of that curve in our area here, and so if the council would decide to take the max amount, which is set at no more than 3% plus growth, and the last year hasn't been a year of significant growth in our community as we've gone through infrastructure projects, and we're stacking up to get ready for potential new growth in 2026. I think the important piece is of a home's value. You know, a $500,000 home, that's $5 additional per year. So the levy adjustment is not significant here. Going into this year, we're unsure how our legislators are going to be working, and they're going to be working hard for sure, because it's a very, very hot item within our state. But with adjustments potentially coming through legislative action to how our taxation works, we might be looking at additional reliance on sales tax. I know one proposal was, geez, I think $1.50 transaction fee on anything under $15. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not here to talk about that in detail tonight, but that seems pretty extreme to me. But nonetheless, you know, additionally, as they make these adjustments, if they rely heavier on sales tax to fund our municipalities and counties, I hope they have better enforcement. You know, I think out of 5 enforcement tests that we did this year during the rally, there was 3 failures. So we continue to struggle on trying to make sure that everybody that's doing business in our community is paying their proper sales tax. So with that, are there any questions to Aaron's report? Is there any additional direction? Is someone willing to motion this? That's truly where we're at on the, it's a tough decision, and I'm not trying to minimize the impact, but I wish my cable bill only went up $5 a year. Oh wait, I don't have cable anymore.
Last year, you recommended putting a certain percentage over, I don't even know how I'm trying to word this. 24 and 25 was the same, but anything over whatever 24 was went to something. Well, I can't remember what that was.
The motion here is moved by Forrester, seconded by Thompson, to approve taking max tax with any amount above the 2024 collection being allocated towards a contingency fund. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to say it again? Could you hear that?
Might be good for people that are watching online to hear.
Okay. Moved by Forrester, seconded by Thompson, to approve taking max tax with any amount above the 2024 collection being allocated towards a contingency fund.
And we maintained a small contingency fund, although we've been using it. And we'll hopefully, if we have any overages, be able to cover those budgets that are exceeded their approval.
And I would just say that the city attorney has asked that any motion include the levy, this year's levy that you're going to approve.
And that levy would be stated as a decimal number, so not $4.13 per thousand, but 0.00414 if there's a desire to change the levy, or 0.00413. So if someone is thinking about making a motion, include that language.
If you're looking at max tax, that's 0.0041439. If you were to keep the property tax at the same number as we did for this year, it would be 0.0039850. And then whatever number between there would, somewhere between those two numbers.
What was the last one you used, Aaron, please? 0.003.
If we kept the property tax collection for 2025 payable in 2026 at $3,131,226, which was what we had for collection in 25 or collection in 24 payable for 2025, that'd be 0.0039850.
So Aaron, can you help me? Then that makes a lot of what I just said not accurate information. How did I get off from what the Director of Equalization provided?
Well, what she provided was the max tax number, and the max tax number is 0.0041439.
Just as a comment, when people ask me how Sturgis is doing after hearing them a year ago, I tell them we had a chaos much in the city, and whether or not we were going to have even a chance to continue seemed to be a question. 12 months later, we have, in fact, got smooth sailing, and a lot of it has to do with this team. And I think the reflection back to the community, I had a large sales property tax on my house last year, and I'm sure most people did. And I know that we have to consider all of the needs of the city, but to get it back, it seems like to get it back on the taxpayer, especially we have such a, like me, so many retirees who have limited income. It seems that if we have a max tax, I think that sends the wrong issue to the people. I think the people need to know that what we're doing is understanding that we have to continue to run the city, continue to progress as best we can, but we also need to take care of the people that are helping that happen. And so I propose that same levy that we used last year to have the same amount of property tax, that we would use that 0.0039850 would be my proposal. And I don't know if we need a comment or thinking on that, but I just think that the city needs to know that we're not sitting here. I used to have a bumper sticker that I used when I was in the state Senate. I gave away more than I could print. It said, "Government won't stop spending until we stop sending." And that's something that makes us understand that we, our citizens, people that live next to us, have the same issue. My needs are different than Nick's because of our age. He's got small children. I'm only thinking about great-grandchildren, but that involves gifts to them too. But that's my thinking on it, and I think I commend our council and Mayor Forrester with what we have done. We took chaos and made it into a smooth sea, and it's not over. And because of our public works and the people that work in the city, I think we really made a huge improvement in a short period of time. So I think that we should say to the people, congratulations, you played part of this too. We all had huge increases in our property tax a year ago. I think I said earlier, the only thing that did come up in my cul-de-sac was where I'm the president. The only thing that didn't go up was the homeowner fees. And otherwise, the insurance, the taxes, everything was higher. And I think we need to do what we can to help not have people continue to have increased costs. So that's part.
Just for clarity, last year we were at 0.00413, and the year before that, in 2024, our mill levy was 0.00399. So if you did adopt 0.00398, you're in a ballpark where we were back in 24, the 23 taxes payable in 24. So, but last year we were at 0.00413 versus if you did max tax, it would be 0.0414.
I'm sure that of 7,200 people that live in Sturgis, there are maybe 17 of them that would understand what mill levies, and all they do understand is how much they get their bill is when it comes to pay taxes twice a year.
Okay, I'll give you an example. I took our taxes, and if you did the lower one, our taxes would be $87 less.
What do you mean the lower one? What he just said, or the
The 398 as compared to the 414.
Again, I think it comes back to the message we send to the people. We meet here every couple of weeks and we try to take care of the city business, and I believe that we've done well. Again, everywhere I go, people want to know. I thought everybody would know how well we're doing. I was in a meeting in Spearfish on Saturday, and somebody said, "If you moved to Sturgis, my gosh, that city is it still in chaos?" I said, "Well, it was a year ago, but it ain't today." And we've got a good crew. I mean, this has worked well, and I think the city should be able to see the same thing. If we got another tax increase, I think that just says, hell, they can't spend it as fast as they get it. And I think what we need to do is take care of the people.
I would like to piggyback on what you say, and I'm in agreement with you that we need to lessen the tax burden on the residents of Sturgis. I think that there's work to be done for us with enforcing sales tax collection, but also work that we're doing on the ordinance committee with some formation of new ordinances, and then working on recodifying some of the existing ordinances. And so that's on us. That being said, I'm not interested in increasing it. I would propose that we keep it the same as it was currently. So the let me get the right decimal, 0.00413 instead of raising it to the 414.
Is that a motion?
That would be a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Very good. We got a first by Ruth and a second by Tony to keep the mill levy for the city of Sturgis to the Meade County Auditor at 0.00413, which is equal to last year's value. Is there any further discussion?
I think that'll give us some time. We're fairly new council to take a serious look at stuff. I know when I ran, the mill levy was brought up many, many times when I stopped and talked to people. So I agree with Ruth. I think, I don't want to raise it anymore. Let's keep it where it is. People kind of got used to that. And if we go and raise it right away, I think we need to, I think we're going to hear about it. So, yeah, I'm with Ruth on that deal.
Any other comments? All right, we're going to go ahead and roll call this just because tonight. I'll call the question. I'll start with you, Ruth.
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Jim?
No.
Nick?
Yes.
We've certified the levy to the Meade County Auditor, and you'll be sending that off to them tomorrow, one day before the deadline. All right, we don't have a need for executive session tonight, so that brings us to the end of our agenda. Would someone be willing to move adjournment?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
First by Nick and a second by Jim to adjourn. Those in favor indicate by stating yes.
Yes.